Hey everybody, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
We're brought to you by BigBattery.com. No matter what you need to power, Big Battery can provide you with the latest battery tech at the best price per kilowatt hour guaranteed. Their batteries are easily installed, require zero maintenance, and they're made right here in the U.S. Pick up yours today at BigBattery.com and use code NOWYOUKNOW for 5% off at checkout.
And we're brought to you by ABetterRoutePlanner.com. Use our link in the show notes below to get a 30-day free trial to the premium app.
Hey Jesse, do you like to keep your brain sharp?
Yeah, I'd like to, but I mean, lately, like a lot of us, I think I've been feeling my brain getting dull.
Yeah, well, I have a solution for you.
Like what? A brain sharpening machine?
Well, kind of. I mean, we're sponsored by our friends at Brilliant. Brilliant has courses on all kinds of subjects to get your brain sharp again, like cryptocurrency, logic, and computer science.
But how is this any different than boring lectures, which I hate, by the way?
Yeah, I know how much you hate boring lectures, and you're exactly right. Research has shown that problem solving is way more effective than lectures, and that's how Brilliant works. I like Brilliant's courses because they are laid out like a story and broken down into little pieces so that you can tackle them a little bit at a time.
Oh, that's cool, because I was just going to say I usually don't have that much time either.
So I'm taking a course on probability, statistics, and finance, and I'm really enjoying it. I also feel, well, sharper.
Ooh, I'm going to take this one, a 4-course path on science foundations.
So join Jesse and I in a community of 8 million learners and educators today.
To support our channel and learn more about Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/nowyouknow and sign up for free.
And also, the first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription.
So, Tesla Supercharger network is now apparently going to be opened up to all EVs.
Yeah, I thought it was only this tweet that came out last week where Elon said, we're making our Supercharger network open to other EVs later this year. And then we got one question from Aaron saying, will it be open to other EVs in all countries or just specific ones? And Elon said,
over time, all countries. And we thought that was it. We would have to sift through the details of time like some kind of archaeologist. But then Elon just came right out on the earnings call and
walked us through it.
Walked us through the plan.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said that you're going to have an app. If you're a non-Tesla owner, you'll have probably the same app or a similar app. You'd pull in with, let's say, your VW ID4 to a supercharger. You would tell it which stall you were at, and then it would start telling you things like, I guess, the pricing based on the time of day and how slow your car is at charging. He said that they're going to charge more on peak times, which makes sense. And they're going to charge more if your car takes longer to charge, which makes sense.
Right. So it'll be time-based charging, which, some people think is unfair because, you'd be paying more for electricity since your car is charging slower. But if you think about it from the perspective of like critical infrastructure and like having other people come and use, then time-based charging does sort of make sense. And I think that this is what Tesla would do there. My thought is that Tesla is one of the only companies in the world that has an AI that it kind of is built for this, where it can balance power. I'm speaking, of course, about AutoBidder. So they have one right now which works with, grid-tied batteries and solar, and it's able to basically make money by buying and selling power between batteries and to the grid. I wonder if they can use a similar AI. I mean, they definitely have the right team to write an AI to create pricing based on demand. So that could basically, for people who are worried that the supercharger network is going to get overrun by, ID3s and ID4s. And
But let's just walk through this for a second. So you're saying that if there's a fairly crowded supercharger and it's a peak time, like after work and people are charging up, that I pull in with my VW ID4 and I check my app to see what it's going to cost. And it's like, oh boy, this is going to cost quite a bit. Maybe I won't charge right now. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think that it could be smart enough to do this, because I think the biggest concern with Tesla owners right now is that we've had it really good. We've had this amazing network that we didn't have to share with anybody else.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So right now there's a ratio, right? We're calling it the Tesla Supercharger happiness ratio, right? And the way we got at this number, and the magic number, by the way, is 72. So keep that in your mind. The way we got at that number, if you take the 1.8 million cars divided by the 25,000 charger stalls, you get the magic number of 72 cars per stall. And you might say, wait a minute, when I pull into a supercharger, there aren't 72 cars there. Right, because they don't all charge at the same time.
Right.
And many of us don't charge at a supercharger for days on end. But that number, that 72 to 1 ratio, seems to be a pretty good ratio. I know there are some superchargers in California where it's like they need more of them, sure. But overall, throughout the world, that ratio seems to work. Well, going forward, you might be asking, how many cars are we potentially talking about here? So let's do some math. There have been 10.4 million EVs sold since 2011.
Now, of course, 1.8 million of those are Teslas, so that leaves 8.6 million EVs that could potentially be charging at a Tesla Supercharger. Now, about 35% of those 8.6 million are plug-in hybrids.
Yeah, and so those 35% plug-in hybrids, probably most of them can't DC fast charge, so let's take them out.
Okay, so now we're talking about like 5.6 million EVs. Some of them might be able to fast charge, some of them might not be able to, but just for sake of argument, let's say it's about 5.5 million EVs in the world that could pull into a Tesla Supercharger station and just block it up. So that now takes our ratio from 72 to 296.
Yikes. So that is over 4 times more cars, which means Tesla would have to build out a supercharger network 4 times over to keep up with that golden ratio.
Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that the EVs that we're talking about, some of them I would say are long range capable. I would say, the e-trons, but some of them are going to be a little bit smaller battery capacity and might not be making long distance trips very frequently. So it might not be quite as bad as,
hang on. I want to talk about a piece of the math that we haven't done yet.
True.
Which is time of charge. So Tesla's charge very fast at superchargers. Even my, older Model X Sparky can handle 150 kilowatts. Newer models, of course, can charge at peak rates of 250 kilowatts, maybe even 300, we heard recently. So that's fast. But most other EVs can't handle these high charge rates.
The Chevy Bolt, for example, charges at a max rate of 55 kilowatts. The Audi e-tron charges at 150. So these EVs will be sitting at supercharger for a much longer time than a Tesla would. So it's going to be hard to be accurate about how much longer the average EV would charge than a Tesla. But if we make some quick assumptions that the average other EV max charges at around 100 kilowatts and has an average battery pack of 60 kilowatt hours, then the average other EV is going to take about 3 times as long to charge at a Tesla Supercharger. That could be a big problem because now the ratio is going to be thrown off a little bit worse.
Yeah, so we have to take our 4x that we had there and multiply it by 3. So now we're at 12 times more superchargers needed to make the happiness ratio work.
Right.
And I want to point out another thing, which I don't quite, it hasn't made sense yet in my head. Elon said you pull in your other EV and then you pull out your app. But hang on, if I have an Audi e-tron, my charger is over by the driver's side door, not in the back. See, all Teslas have the charger in the same spot, right? The left side rear. So it all works. But all other EV manufacturers put them in weird places, like the Nissan Leaf has it in the very front center. The e-tron has it on the side. So if I pull in with an e-tron, first of all, most supercharger stalls are back in. Mm-hmm. Meaning if I back in my e-tron, I can't even, the cable won't reach. The cables are short.
Even if you drive in straight, it won't reach. So
I'd have to pull in sideways, which means I'd be blocking like 2 or 3 stalls.
I think that Elon gets ideas in his head and they sound really good. And I don't know if he just hasn't thought through the details of some of this or if he has some plan that they're going to extend the length of cable.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why the cables are short is because the longer you make the cable, the more resistance there is in it.
True.
So we don't even know if you can extend the cable much longer with high rates of charge.
I think that you could. The bigger problem is that they're going to be, on the ground and that they could be driven over, stepped on. And
right. That's the beauty of them being so short.
Right.
It's very hard unless you drop one on the ground. Right. It's hard for it to be on the ground. The other point that I want to make is that Elon brought this up in the call. He said there would have to be an adapter that you would buy. First of all, that doesn't answer my question about the e-tron where it doesn't reach at all.
Right.
But secondly, he said, maybe we'll have them at the stalls. Hopefully no one will steal them. These are going to be worth hundreds of dollars, these adapters. These aren't going to be like little $35 things. These are going to be like kind of like the CHAdeMO adapter or the CCS adapter.
They cost $500.
Right. So no, you're not, Elon, you're not going to leave them laying around. That means that if I'm an Audi e-tron owner, I would have to buy this adapter, which I might do, but that's going to be hundreds of dollars.
I think that this is in the early stages of development.
Well, can I go to what I think this might be, actually?
What?
I don't think he really intended it to be for all other EV manufacturers. I think that he wants it to be for certain manufacturers, like maybe Aptera, where, we've talked with the CEOs of Aptera. In fact, we were on a Now You Know Investor Club call with them the other day. And, we got a question from one of our members directly to the co-CEOs of Aptera, Chris and Steve, and he asked this.
On the car itself, what is the charge port going to be? We're looking at a lot of different standards. Obviously, the supercharging network is a nice place to be, but CCS2 and regular old J1772 are.
The short answer is they're both designed in, and we'll just see which one we can get to production with.
And I don't know about you, but that gave me the feeling that they are indeed in talks with Tesla. And that's right. Our Now You Know Investor Club heard this over a month ago, which is really cool. We get to talk to CEOs and hear what they're saying. And Chris basically said, we put both architectures into our car. Now, why would you do that unless you thought there's a really good chance that you could use it?
Right.
So that's great news for Aptera, first of all. Even regardless of who else can use it, if Apteras can pull into superchargers, that's awesome.
I'm excited about pulling into a supercharger with an Aptera, because right now, I mean, charging in my car, I can get up to, like 1,000 miles an hour charging speed at 250 kilowatts. In an Aptera, pulling 250 kilowatts, it's easily going to be double the miles per hour charging rate.
I think I think Elon, by this announcement, just increased the value of, let's say, Arcimoto stock and potentially Aptera stock when they go public. Because now what you're saying is, for these little tiny companies that probably would have trouble making deals with big charging networks and so forth, you've basically said, hey, I'm going to lower down the drawbridge here, guys, over the moat, and you guys are welcome on into the castle.
Right.
So that's pretty good news, because, I mean, that was one of their weakest points, was like, hey, where are you going to charge these at? Now he's saying, hey, you're welcome at a Tesla Supercharger. And if they're welcome at a Tesla Supercharger, that means they could also potentially charge at their destination charger network, which isn't as fast, but there's a lot of them.
And I mean, all EVs can charge at Tesla destination chargers now. You just need an adapter, a less expensive adapter, because it's not a DC fast charging adapter. But yeah, I mean, having the plug built into, say, an Aptera would make supercharging and destination charging a whole lot easier. But this does beg the question: is he really just going to open up the network to everyone and anyone, and you just download the app and you just pull in? I mean, that's what he said.
That's what he said.
But it doesn't make any sense, because, like we were talking about with the Audi e-tron, like, unless the adapter is 9 feet long to reach around the side of the car and plug it in, how are we going to plug in cars that don't have the ports in the right place? Most of them are on the side.
I think what this did was, it basically said to these manufacturers, your customers are going to start demanding this, and if you don't start working with us on basically putting these ports on your cars, you're only going to allow certain customers who pay for these expensive adapters, and who also, I don't know what, piss off other Tesla owners when they pull in sideways at a Tesla. Like, there's no way we're going to stand for an e-tron.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, what if they do?
But I think that what is going to happen is, it's going to force some of these other car manufacturers to come and talk to Tesla and say, what can we do to actually start implementing your protocols? And I think that means he's going to ask for some kind of payment, which means they can speed up the construction of the supercharger network. Now, I want to talk about this article from Teslarati that talked about Goldman Sachs estimating that Tesla could earn $25 billion from opening up their network.
Yes, but let's just read the fine print here.
Do we have to?
Yes, of course we do. So it boils down to this chart where Goldman Sachs makes their assumptions. First, on the left-hand axis, it's the daily EVs charged, and it's very unclear what they mean. They mean per stall. So every stall that Tesla has, and right now they have 25,000 stalls, this would be each stall, how many EVs are going to charge at each stall on average.
Okay, so the top number is 5. So that means if you assume 5 cars per day at a stall, that's reasonable.
It's very reasonable. And then the top axis is how many supercharger stalls does Tesla have? And so it starts at 25,000,
which is what they've got today.
Well, they have about 29,000, but let's call it 25,000. Then it goes all the way up to 500,000, which is 20 times what Tesla currently has.
Wow. Okay. But so they're saying their best case, where you have 15 cars at a stall per day and 500,000 stalls, they could make $28 billion a year in revenue?
But again, but this is, again, just top line revenue.
What do you mean?
I mean, most of this $28 billion would be going straight into the price of electricity, into the construction of supercharger stalls and their maintenance. So, again, revenue does not equal profit. The profit would be likely significantly lower than that.
By the way, how did they get these numbers?
Well, they hit a kind of a key assumption, which is that they estimate that the average charging session will generate $10.50 in revenue.
So that means that the average person charging there is going to pay 10. That sounds about right.
It sounds a little low to me. I would honestly think that if you're a non-Tesla charging at a supercharger, it should be higher. That's maybe just my biased opinion.
Okay, so even more revenue.
Yes, but again, it depends on a lot of different things. But like we were saying, again, it's just revenue. Once you start to pay for the electricity and all of the other stuff, it becomes less and less exciting.
And this is why other auto manufacturers don't want to build out the charging network. It doesn't make much money.
Right.
I mean, Tesla didn't build out the supercharging network because it makes a lot of money. They built it because it makes the cars so much more enjoyable to drive.
And this is the point where Tesla is going to need to extract money from somewhere. It's either going to be from the drivers of non-Tesla EVs, or it's going to need to be from the companies of those car companies.
Yeah, it sounded like what Drew said on the earnings call is that they're going to get much better at extracting more money during peak times, more money if your car is slow. So they're probably going to extract that from the EV drivers.
But now my question is, how affected will Tesla drivers be? I'm worried
too.
That you're going to pull up to a supercharger station. It's going to be full of non-Teslas.
Well, let me give you an example. I was driving with Sparky a few weeks ago, and I had some bikes on the back, and I got to a supercharger down on the Cape where they didn't have a pull install, and I had all these bikes, and I didn't feel like unloading them. No one was there, so I pulled in sideways. I know, I broke the rules, but it was a 10 stall or a 12 stall. No one was there, and I blocked a couple, and I charged up for 10 minutes, and it turned out that I didn't block anyone because no one showed up. But that was me doing it the wrong way. I think what's going to happen is, since, I mean, the Kona, the e-tron, the iPace, they all have the doors in the wrong place. They're all going to have to do that, or occasionally at a supercharger, there is a one pull-in. And in Europe, there are a lot of pull-throughs. But for the most part in the US, they're all back in. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of other EV drivers now icing the spot, so to speak. And yeah, I think it's going to piss off a lot of Tesla drivers, especially at the busy locations.
The whole point of the Tesla Supercharger network is that it's for Teslas. It's not to be mean. It's because Tesla paid for it. And that is one of the benefits. That's one of the reasons I bought my car. Part of the value was not sitting on the four wheels. It was all throughout the world. And Tesla paid to make that happen. And I think that they're not going to turn it on for vehicles that don't pay into the system. I think that they might turn it on for smaller companies, like an Aptera. It would be very smart of Elon to just turn it on for a couple of companies. Maybe he will work with VW, but then maybe it's, okay, well, we made a special deal and they're paying us $1 billion a year in order to use the network. And so because they're paying into that network, there's now more supercharger stalls, which alleviates the demand.
We might also be thinking of this wrong, where we're thinking of just an adapter, a short adapter that you put on it, but it might be an adapter that comes with an extra 10 feet or, 3 meters of cable. That might have to be the solution, especially since those other cars don't charge as fast. So they may not have the resistance problem.
Right. But again, it's really smart, in my opinion, to have them need to download the Tesla app, because now you can simply advertise to them on the Tesla app. You can say, oh, you'd like to charge? It's going to cost you $50. If you had a Tesla, it would have cost you 10.
That's a good point. Let's see, though, is this a popular idea? I mean, do Tesla owners want this to happen?
So we put this poll out to our patrons who come from everywhere in the world, and some of them drive Tesla, some of them don't. It was very popular, although there were a lot of people who absolutely disagreed with this idea.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think what we're seeing is, on one hand, you have Tesla owners who are very apprehensive or flat out against opening the supercharger network to other EV brands. But on the other hand, you have EV owners like Bolts and e-tron owners who are like, yeah, hey, I'd love to be able to use the Tesla supercharger network. And I think that's why we're seeing the split in the poll, because I think the Tesla owners, by and large, are like, what do we have to gain by this?
Right. I think that what Elon should do, because his mission statement is to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy, would be to put more pressure on the companies themselves. Don't just base it on money, but also base it on how clean the rest of that company's fleet is. So instead of just saying like, oh, okay, VW, you're going to pay us $1 billion, say, oh, if you reduce the amount of gas guzzlers that you produce, you'll pay less.
Oh, I like that, because then Arcimoto and Aptera pay basically nothing.
Right. Rivian could pay almost nothing. Lucid could pay almost nothing. It would incentivize companies that weren't owned. Also, probably I would put that clause in there, owned by polluting companies, to basically the more efficient their fleets are, the less they're going to have to pay, and maybe even give incentives to the drivers.
So basically, you're talking about two payments. One that the drivers make each time they charge, which could be very expensive depending on time of day and how slow their cars are at charging. But then another like licensing fee that the car manufacturer would have to pay to be on the network. Now, he didn't mention anything about that licensing fee. It sounds like he was just like, yeah, we'll just open it up. I think that would be dumb. I think he should charge a fee to the auto manufacturers to help him pay to build out the network faster. Now, Drew on the call, and this is Drew Baglino, the senior VP of engineering, implied that with this new revenue, they'd be able to build out the supercharger network faster. But if you go back to the numbers we just showed you, we're not talking about building an extra supercharger a week. We're talking about building out, 15x a week.
And that's worst case. I would argue that, you can increase the number of Teslas in a particular area. It's just a matter of use case. So obviously in cities, it's so much worse because some people don't have access to charging at their homes. But yeah, I would have to say, Tesla's going to need to either make some serious money off of this, either from the manufacturers or from the drivers of non-Tesla EVs.
What this could do is it could put pressure on the other manufacturers because they'll start to charge at Tesla Superchargers, find out how awesome it is that there's superchargers all over, but then say, hey, the fees are kind of high because we're charging here, on a Tesla branded charger. Hey, VW, hey, Ford, why don't you do this and make your own?
And I think what it could also do is Tesla could shut it off. At any point, they could just say, sorry, get out of here.
Oh, you're right. They could say, hey, it's Thanksgiving weekend. We know there's going to be a lot of traffic. So this weekend, no other cars but Teslas are allowed to charge. And that could send a big message across the bow of these other manufacturers saying like, oh, we gave them a taste and now they want it.
And again, they will control the message directly because it will be on the non-Tesla owners' phones, because when they say, oh, I want to charge today, it would say, nope, get out of here. And here is why. And it can have a little explanation of like, call your representative at Volkswagen, since we know that you have an ID3, to let them know that they need to do this, that, and the other thing if you want to be able to charge.
You know what Tesla just did?
What?
They just turned on another facet, another revenue stream, another business, which is they become a charging network. Like, yes, they've always been a charging network, but because it was built into the cars, we never really thought of it that way. But now that they're going to be charging other customers, I got to argue, this is another business they just started.
It is another business. I would argue, though, that it's a toll to get over their moat, which makes sense. If you want to come into the castle, you're going to have to pay a fee.
That's the perfect way to put it.
But I would argue that it defeats the purpose of having a moat in the first place.
No, but you know what it does? Let's think back to peasants in the old days, right?
Okay.
When you got to go into the castle and you went and you came back home and you went, you know how awesome the castle is, everybody?
It's beautiful.
They got markets over there. They're selling bread. Can you believe it? Fresh bread.
I just don't think that it's the same thing. I really don't think that it's the same thing.
I don't know.
The experience won't be any better because it's limited by the car. So I don't think that it is an advantage for Tesla. I think it would. Look,
I want to make this point though. When you go in your Bolt to an EA charger and it's broken, and then you go to a Tesla Supercharger where all the stalls work, it's a completely different thing. Or when you go to an EA charger and there's only two of them and they're both taken up and you're like, crap. Whereas you go to a Tesla Supercharger and there's 8, 10, 12, 16. Then you go, wow, this is what the other side of the world looks like.
It really shows how nice Tesla is, that they really are standing by their mission statement of the accelerating the advent of sustainable energy, because any other company on earth would say, hey, this increases our demand for our vehicles and it will lead to a higher market share of Tesla vehicles. We're not going to give that away. And yet Tesla is still doing that because the mission statement is actually true.
Yeah, Elon said in the earnings call he didn't want this to be a walled garden. But I will argue that when you pull in with your VW, we've made this argument in the past that VW sells Teslas, that when you pull in your VW ID4 to a Tesla Supercharger and you start talking to some Model 3 owners and you start talking to some Model Y owners, you're going to go, wait, how far can you go on a trip?
Right.
What's that game you're playing right now?
Right.
What's that cool thing you're doing in your car? I think that you're going to be sold on your next car being a Tesla.
Unless it's really lonely because all the cars will be driving themselves to the chargers. And you're going to go, what are all these cars doing? Why isn't my car driving itself?
I don't know. I think that this is actually not going to be apocalyptic as long as they can roll it out properly. But from the earnings call, I didn't get the sense that they had spent too much time thinking about it, or at least they weren't letting us into the discussions.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how it goes. Just be ready to tweet to Elon as soon as you see someone parked sideways at the supercharger stall. Because, yeah, I think if we start to see that kind of thing, this policy is going to disappear as fast as it appeared.
I also thought of a new business opportunity for you kids out there selling lemonade. You could start renting out adapters with long cables on them to sit around at the supercharger station with your lemonade and also say, hey, I've got VW adapters, I've got Leaf adapters. You can rent them out at such and such per hour. I mean, because a lot of people aren't going to want to buy them.
That's true. And I don't think that Tesla's just going to leave them laying around to be stolen by anyone walking by.
No.
All right. Well, that was our in-depth. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. If we missed a major point, I'm sure that we did, because this is brand new information. I'm sure I haven't thought through the entire ramifications of it. It's so stressful. We're definitely going to be talking about this more, so definitely hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that way you are notified when we come out with a new episode.
Yeah, we'll see you again next week. Now you know.